increase citizen commitment to democratic governance and reduce tensions among political, regional and ethnic groups. But with all this hope, what is the missing link? Tonight, Bernard Sabiiti, a political analyst, joins us to discuss this matter. Welcome to NTV.
Thank you so much.
We want to start this conversation from the president's letters. He's written about 5 of them, and probably he's writing another one right now. We are not sure. But you know, what's persistent and consistent in all his letters is that he is accusing the opposition of indiscipline. What kind of position does that, put our opposition in the country?
First of all, I think beginning with the letters, it's a clear indication that the people who work for him, his handlers, and he has so many, his spokespeople, are either incompetent or they really don't know what they are doing. We've seen that since this crisis broke out, as you rightly stated, he has written 5 times using social media, trying to reach out to his protagonists, so the people that he blames for the chaos that currently has been going on. I think for me, from a crisis management perspective, the government has not handled this crisis well at all. First of all, the fact that they responded with a very disproportionate force to what was going on gave more potency actually to the crisis. At the beginning, actually, the protests were very small. They didn't even have a leader. They were starting sporadically, a group of 10 people beginning a bonfire in the middle of the road, and then, making a few slogans and making some noise, and then about 100 police officers would show up. Creating a crisis which in my view really was not as as big as it was being portrayed, but it's because of the response that was disproportionate. From the content of his missives, I think it clearly shows you that the government, while Mr. Museveni is a master at many things political, he has yet to discover how to handle this thing called new media or social media, and the role of this kind of new media within the political dynamic of not just Uganda but Africa in general. And we've seen so many leaders across Africa struggling on how to deal with information they cannot control. In the past, we knew that they could easily invade the newspaper or any media house and close it off. Right now, the information control and management is largely out of their hands. That's why you see him trying to reach out also through the same social media and trying to put his message across. But I would have expected that his spokespeople or his many advisors, hundreds of them who draw a salary, would have probably advised him on how to do things a little more differently. In terms of what he's saying, you could clearly see that he still doesn't really know what is going on, or what is causing some of this fracas that we have seen. He's talking about indisciplined opposition people, but I don't know if he expected his political opponents to be different or to respect him in such a way that in the way of contesting for power that they have to kneel down. Or I don't know what he means by indisciplined, but obviously any political actor will try to gain leverage from his opponent, and that's what the opposition has been trying to say. He also talks about youth who are unemployed as being gullible to being drawn into these protests, but I think the story is a little deeper. I think we have a serious problem in terms of the political space that has been shrinking every other day.
And of course, this also includes, media freedom, because whenever such happens, or when the protests break out, it's not only the people taking part that suffer. Actually, it's everything. The economy, the tourism, everything, journalists, and the media. Some of our colleagues have been receiving messages to threaten them. Don't say this, don't write this.
Horrible images coming from how some of those soldiers were beating up journalists. And
actually, if I just cut you short, Minister Sam Kutesa, days ago, he was saying that the international image is still okay.
Yeah.
Is that what it portrays?
No, I do not agree. I think, context is everything. Somebody who is watching these images from Canada does not understand the full context of Uganda. And anyone who had plans, for example, of passing by as a tourist, this is not a country you want to go to when you see those images. We've seen foreign embassies issuing travel advisories to their citizens who might have been intending to visit Uganda. That's very bad for our economy. We gain a lot from tourism, and definitely the last thing you would have expected to have is these kinds of images being beamed to the world. And again, as I said, some of this is really an own goal from some of the government actors, because the way they are using a hammer to kill a fly, in my view, you would even expect that probably the walk-to-work protests in 2011 were more politically dangerous, in my view, to the regime than these sporadic protests that even do not have a leader. They were just been, starting from sporadic around the town, and then the military, very, responding in a very disproportionate way. So I think some of this has been self-inflicted, and in the end, of course, it's the economy that suffers, because we are going to be seeing less and less of the people that might be willing to come to Uganda to visit.
I know of government spokespersons who, say, it's okay for you to talk, but as you point out the problems, also point out the solutions. What can be done before we move on to the next, because I want us to look at, just about 3 issues. We'll pick from the president's speech about employment and employment of the youth, which he says is the biggest problem. But we also want to, take a look at the rule of law. But you said this is self-inflicted. Then what should the government do?
I think the government needs to understand that dialogue does not necessarily show weakness. I understand that some of the strategies, if they are there in the State House or wherever they reside, I think they think that if they show a message of viciousness against any potential protest, then that is going to scare any other person that might have been thinking of organizing more protests in the future not to do the same. But we've seen that once you do not address the root cause of a problem and you only treat a symptom, you are not producing a sustainable solution to a problem. And so maybe it would serve the government better to look at the root cause of this anger that we've been seeing, rather than just addressing the effects. And that is the biggest problem. We know that from the government's own survey that 95% of our graduates who finish university cannot find a job. A lot of these young people are angry, not so much because they think the new leaders they are putting their hopes in can deliver something better, but they are complaining that a lot is going wrong, that they need to see change. For some of the young people that we have today, many of them have really not have any interfaces with bad governance before. When we talk about public goods that are broken down, schools, hospitals, some of them maybe do not go to those schools or do not go to those hospitals. But we've been seeing public policy that directly impact these millennials, and they are mad. The social media attacks is one example. Most of these guys using social media, they were for the very first time subjected to a direct pinch of a bad policy from the government. And so you could see that the kind of response and reaction to some of the government actions has been informed by the fact that for the first time they are beginning to actually realize that bad governance does not only affect their parents, it also affects them directly, that politics has consequences, that elections have consequences, and I think that has been galvanizing them to come up and join these protests. So I think for the government really needs to cool down in the way that they respond to some of these disturbances, which I still think that Mr. Museveni has total grip on the government. I still think that his far-reaching patronage system that reaches all corners of the country is still solid. But when you see these forced errors from some of the people in the establishment, then something that might be simple can easily spiral out of control, especially in this age of social media.
The Bobby Wine effect.
Yeah.
We did talk about it a few days in our news bulletins here. And this is a gentleman who for long called himself, the ghetto president.
Yes.
And somehow today he's now appealing to a much, much larger, group of the youth especially. Wouldn't, this be a time the government wants to reflect on what he has used to, to gather or garner support from the youth and probably use it to their advantage?
You see, Mr. Bobby Wine, as he's called, is actually also a creature of this regime, as much as many people might not agree to that. I think the way that they have responded to him, especially in the last 2 weeks, they have created a political matter from an otherwise ordinary member of parliament. So what has happened right now is that because of the brutality meted against him and his colleagues, now they are not just national leaders, they are not just regional leaders, they are now international leaders. And these are the mistakes that I was telling you from the very beginning, that you have a younger politician, 36 years old, 3/4 of the population of this country are in his age bracket. 80% of Ugandans today were born after 1986. The median age of this population is only 15 years. We are one of the youngest populations in the world. These guys don't know about Idi Amin and how he fought Obote. That's not the kind of history that they are interested in. They want jobs. They want a good life. They have access to the media. They see how things are run in other countries. So they have expectations. Some of them might be very high compared to what the government can be able to provide. But the government dismisses most of them outright as if they have no merit at all. And that's a very big mistake.
The president, just today, he did also mention again that, the key factors to have this country stable are sorted. And to him, number one is security. Though he also said that he is installing security cameras across Kampala to, curb those, what he calls little, crimes here and there. But then also, he still mentions indiscipline, and then, he says, we shall deal with you, statements like that. But then we see this translating to what happens on ground, because the president writes and he says, anyone who is indisciplined will be dealt with.
Yeah.
And we want to think that what happens on ground when the soldiers, unleash terror on journalists, the public, or even politicians, some of them are still ailing in hospitals. This is, something they pick directly from what he says. And this also leads us to the rule of law. What methods or modalities do we need to employ to ensure that our country, or there is respect for rule of law?
First of all, I understand where the president is coming from. In terms of security, I think most of the country has been secure for the most part, especially our external security. Internal security, that premise is being challenged every day with the increasing murders. But I also would like to disagree that just physical security is enough to make people content. I don't think security physically, without food security, without the security of the future, without security of one's aspirations, if you do not have those, then physical security alone cannot be enough. And this is why these people who would say that at least we can sleep, we only have a very small percentage of our population that still believes that that's a notion enough to vote a government in power. If you sleep when you are hungry, you will not get good sleep. So you need some peace of mind. You know the hierarchy of needs, as we are told. People have aspirations. People don't just want to stop at having basic needs or barely living, existing through life. People have aspirations. People want to become something. So once you deny people that idea and that opportunity to actually make something out of themselves, they will not listen to you when you just say that, oh, now you have security, you must be happy. That's not good enough. They need to have a secure future as well. Not just security is not just the absence of war, you know. So when you talk about the rule of law, I think in this country we are very good at passing laws and having legal instruments, but then abiding by them, especially in governance, has always been a problem. We know that the 1995 Constitution, for example, was one of the masterful documents that came out of the post-1986 era. But we know the kind of distortions that have been applied to that Constitution also to fit the agendas of certain people. We know that the government is very happy to quote from the Constitution. I was watching the chiefs today, the security chiefs addressing the media, and Mr. Ochura was quoting from the Constitution, the duties of a citizen, how you need, to support your community, not to cause trouble, and things like that. But that's a selective quoting the law. That same Constitution also empowers Ugandans if they are not happy. If they find that the people they put in charge have actually done the opposite of what they were put in charge for, that they have a right to remove such leaders. So that is also in our Constitution. So when you look at the rule of law, I would say that the government will abide by it only if it suits them. But when it comes to civil liberties and protecting the people's right, for example, to assemble and to express their opinions, there are severe limits on that. And we have been seeing that in terms of how the security forces have been responding to these disturbances.
All right, in a very, very, very few seconds, I want you to, conclude on the issue of the judiciary. We have the courts of law, but is our judiciary between, a rock and a hard place in terms of actually making some of the decisions? We have seen, people being taken to court and then there's no evidence produced, or we've seen actually people being tortured, while in detention, being held in detention for more than 48 hours.
I think this is a serious challenge to the Chief Justice and the people that serve under him. I would say that our judiciary for a very long time historically has always gone through very murky waters, but especially at this critical moment, I think the judiciary needs to assert itself more. I don't think that they do enough of that. I know that they can be independent, especially on cases that are not politically charged. But when it comes to politically charged issues, unfortunately, we tend to see that sometimes they are cowed. They are kind of intimidated, even if nobody physically threatens them. But we know, for example, we have the president on record, for example, warning judges against giving bail to certain suspects, and so when you have this kind of rhetoric from a very high ranking political leader, who by the way appoints most of these judges, then they are also human beings. Of course they will be a little bit more careful in how they educate in terms of how they decide cases, and this is not good, of course, for Uganda. So we need an independent judiciary so that everyone can have a shot at justice when time allows.
All right, thank you very much. Bernard Sabiiti, he is a researcher on issues of governance and also a political analyst, and that was Talk of the Nation. Let's take a break and we'll return with more.
What this law is trying to say is that if you are in a cohabiting relationship and you acquire property, everything is very nice and sweet at that time.